Welcome to Caucus Connections, a podcast with the Kentucky House Majority Caucus.
And welcome to Caucus Connections. I'm your host, John Alexander. With us on today's episode is Derrick Ramsey, former Kentucky Secretary of Education and Workforce Development. How are you today, sir?
I couldn't be any better, John. I mean, it's crazy times, but we too will get through this as well.
That's pretty much our only option, isn't it? Just to get through it the best we can.
That's exactly right.
You had quite the football career early on, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in the show. But first, I want to ask you about your primary focus while you were over at the Capitol building. Where was it you wanted to get Kentucky to, and are we there yet?
We're certainly not there. Not even close to being there. Where I wanted us to get to, John, every meeting that I sat in with economic development, when new businesses were looking at potentially coming to Kentucky, there were two questions that was always asked. The skill level workforce in Kentucky and our education level. And so those two things were paramount for us to be successful and for us to be attractive to businesses to move to Kentucky. So one of the things I was desperately trying to do was increase the number of our apprentices around the state, and of course getting over to the education side, working with KCTCS to have more of our folk get an education.
When you were there, when you were at the Capitol, you've been to England to see their approach. How is England?
Right.
How is England getting it right as it relates to apprenticeship programs? Would you like to see more of that in the States, especially here in Kentucky, what they do over there?
Absolutely, I would. Let me share with the people of Kentucky what they were doing in England. And I was over there maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, somewhere thereabouts. And what England decided they wanted to do was they wanted to be an international player again. And, John, what that means is you have to have a skilled workforce and you have to have an educated workforce. And so they started with their apprenticeship program at Ground Zero about 12 years ago. And when I was there, they had gone from 0 to 850,000 journeymen and journeywomen, as well as getting those folk educated on a parallel track. So while they were becoming journeymen and journeywomen on one track, on another track, they were getting their bachelor's degree. So at the end of 3 years, they had both. They were journeymen and journeywomen, as well as their bachelor's degree. And so I was trying to set it up where we could duplicate a program with that, however, just working with KCTCS, as well as working with the 4 years. Because for Kentucky to be attractive, we're going to have a more skilled and educated workforce. But not only Kentucky, John, around the country, there's maybe 550, 600,000 journeymen around the country. And so with that in mind, also, the average age of a skilled laborer or a journeyman or journeywoman is 60 years of age. So for us to be competitive in years to come, we have to start filling that pipeline with younger people to take their place.
Those journeymen they're close to exiting the workforce, aren't they?
You got that right. At 60, yeah, they're kind of peeping over the hill, if you would. But this is something Kentucky can do. I'm certain that we can do this. That's the thing I love about Kentucky, that we're always up for the challenge. So now we just have to go ahead and get this done for us to be attractive. If not, I think we're going to continue to be a Passover state.
Now, you're if I've got this correct, I think I do. You're a senior fellow at KCTCS. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What do you think? How much are we dropping the ball at the high school level when it comes to preparing our kids for the future? I really like that program that you mentioned that England was doing. How are you at KCTCS helping maybe do something similar to that?
Well, before I talk about what I'm doing at KCTCS, John, there was another critical program that we were just getting off the ground, and that's called a K-Tech. And what K-Tech is IBM started their program. It's called P-Tech. And what they were doing was they were going into the high schools, and as a freshman, these young people start taking college courses. And so in a 6-year period, that's from ninth grade to 2 years after, although most of them were getting their high school diploma and getting their associate's degree 1 year or sometime later. And what they were doing, IBM's program, because over a 7-year period, IBM was going to lose about 25,000 employees to retirement. So what IBM was trying to do was they're filling that void that they have with this retirement. Now, K-Tech, what we're doing is something similar but different. And it's similar in that we're getting our folk to have a high school diploma as well as an associate's degree. But what we were doing is we were putting a apprentice bent on it. And so my goal was to have about 10 of those around the state, with an average of 100 of them coming out each year. So each year that we would have roughly 1,000 of those folk graduating, going into the workplace. But the great part, again, John, is they would have their high school diploma, they would have their associate's degree, as well as become a journeyman or journeywoman. And let me also add that when I would travel around the state, why I was so committed to this was I would talk to employers, and employers would tell me one of the things that they were suffering from was that it was taking a year to a year and a half before they got a return on their investment. Because, again, folks didn't have the experience. Well, with this K-Tech program and with what I'm doing over at KCTCS now, building a work-based learning center, this will give folk the opportunity to have some work experience before they go to the workplace. So with the thought of, once they go through these programs, the K-Tech program, the work-based learning center, from day one, they will be of value to the employer.
I was about to say that gives them more marketable skills without that high debt over their heads, correct?
Absolutely. And I will be the first to tell you I am not keen on all this college debt. You know, and let me back up a little bit further. Let me tell the listeners this whole where we are today from my perspective. Back in the 70s, when I was coming out of high school, John, there was 2 on-ramps, if you would, to success. One on-ramp was college prep. The other on-ramp was vocational. Well, what's happened over the last 40 years? The vocationals have either been stomped out, squeezed out, or stigmatized out, or just flat done away with. And so what the Bevan administration was doing, we were going to reactivate, if you would, our technical schools. And so Governor Bevan put up $100 million. And so it was called a Work Ready. And so the cities were allowed to put up matching monies. I think this was under Hal Heiner, when Hal was over there, and I kind of finished it once Hal had gotten this thing taken care of. But what they had done was put that $100 million up, and each community would have to put X amount of skin in the game, be it 10 or 15 or 20%. I can't remember exactly what it was now. But also what they had to put in was a high school, then a secondary school, as well as businesses from the community. So what you had there was at every level, the community was engaged. And so you have the high school where these young people were getting the opportunity to learn these skills. Then they would go on to the community college where they would get an associate's degree. And then they would go right into the workplace. And so these are the kinds of creative things that we have to do, I believe, if we're going to be competitive.
So really with that program, business leaders could see what crop of young people they had to choose from coming up, couldn't they?
Well, not only that, what they could get an opportunity to do was they get a chance to, as a student, they get a chance to test drive that work environment to see if that's something that they want to do for the rest of their career. And the employers, they get a chance to see, okay, with these young people, what they have to do to get them ready for the next step in their careers. So it was a win-win from my perspective for both sides.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I'm fascinated by with this sort of talk too, about getting people involved in the workforce, is the classic 4-year liberal arts degree. That isn't necessarily the path for everybody, is it?
No, it isn't. But I am certainly pro-education.
Yes.
But I am pro-opportunity. And I am anti-debt. And so somewhere in between there's a sweet spot, if you would, for us to accomplish that. Now, as you mentioned, 4 years for everyone. If I were a young person today, did not have an athletic scholarship or academic scholarship in hand, I probably would not go to a 4-year. We have this work-ready monies where there are these 5 high-demand areas where I can get my tuition paid for, become a journeyman, and also grab my associate's degree and have all my money in my pocket. And oh, by the way, when you're becoming a journey person, be it woman or man, when I was in office, these guys would start at roughly $11.25 an hour, and it will go up from there. And when we're talking about apprenticeships, we're not talking about cheap labor. We're talking about labor that you're grooming to take that next step and be your employer. And so it has to be a learning environment. It has to be an environment where people get to understand what it means to be in the workplace, because so many of our young people do not have an idea of what it means to be in the workplace. And what you hear so frequently is the absence of soft skills. And so those are simple things like being on time, like dressing professional, like being respectful. And so if young people haven't had that kind of experience, then we may be expecting too much of them to just come in and just go with it. And so these K-Tech and apprentice-type programs, the co-ops, the internships, those are all things that get our folk ready to be competitive.
And what are some of those career paths, too, as far as, are we talking mechanics, plumbers? What are the different sort of jobs a person could look into with that sort of thing?
Well, the interesting part about that is for years and years and years, people only thought about the construction bent.
Right.
Welding, construction, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Well, the reality is, John, there's over 1,000 apprenticeable ideas and concepts. For example, banking, IT, healthcare, insurance. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's not just those construction concepts only.
And look how crucial healthcare even has been, especially this past year that we've been going through.
Not only this past year, John. Here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, when we left office, 9.8% of the jobs in the Commonwealth were healthcare related. And as you fast forward that to 2025, that number is going to be around 14%. So there are a plethora of opportunities in healthcare. And when people think of healthcare, not just, your nursing and becoming a doctor, a phlebotomist, there are all kinds of ways that they could get engaged. I mean, for example, when you think of a plumber, when you think of an IT person, well, those two people I just mentioned, those are different folk that work at a hospital because of the different type equipment that they use in there.
Do you feel, and you talk about colleges all the time, mentioning, especially with the 4-year degree, with that process, the student experience, is that as important to you? Do you think as actually having these marketable skills right out of the gate? Or is there a hybrid maybe that's out there?
Well, that's what the K-Tech is. I
right.
mean, that's your hybrid. Where you become a journeyman or journeywoman as well as getting yourself an associate's degree. That's the hybrid. But again, for Kentucky to be competitive, these are the kinds of things that we have to do. You know, what's interesting also, John, is if you look at where we are, I mean, just absent of the COVID. Prior to COVID, what you were starting to see was a big movement in our country. People were coming from Oregon, California, Arizona, and settling in Texas and on the East Coast, New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, New York. Those folks were settling in Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio. So with this great migration, that's why it's critical for us, if we're going to have some of these people stop and live here in Kentucky, we have to be competitive. And more importantly for these businesses, if we here in Kentucky are going to be attractive, these are the things that we have to do. If not, we will not be attractive, and they will continue to go to your Carolinas, your Tennessee. And let me back up here, John. You go back 30 years ago. You look at where Louisville was, and you look at where Nashville was. They were very similar. Where's Nashville today? Where are we? That's just one city. Now let's talk about the state itself. You go back 30 years or so ago, 35 years ago, Indiana, Tennessee, Ohio, Kentucky, we were all at about 3.5 to 4.2 million. Fast forward that today, Kentucky at 4.4, Indiana, Ohio is about 6, Tennessee is about 7 million, that is. And so, again, we have to become more attractive for businesses to want to be here.
And that too, I think, with those skilled workers, that's something that'll help attract those businesses, won't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that is the attraction for businesses. Well, because if I'm business one or business A, if I'm going to move here, I'm not going to move here and wait for you to get employees ready for me to go. I'm going to move here, and you're going to have employees ready for me to go from day one. I'm not moving here.
I was about to say
time is money.
They're going to research that ahead of time, aren't they?
That's correct. That's exactly right, and that goes back to some of those meetings that I spoke about earlier that I sat in. So hence, that's how I know
right.
What they're looking for.
Is that the advice you would give? Of course, the focus of the General Assembly over the past 4 years has been very pro-business and pro-jobs.
Yes.
What advice would you give our legislators now as it relates to jobs, especially in this time of COVID? Is it pretty much what you've been talking about this focusing on skilled laborers?
John, it couldn't be personified more than now. And let me tell you why. In our country, the last I read a couple of days ago, small businesses, over 100,000 of them have shut down. So we've been in this thing since about February. And looks like we're going to be in another couple, 3 or 4 months maybe, until there's a vaccine. When that happens, the businesses that have survived, they can't carry anyone that's not of value from day one. And so, because again, they've weathered the storm, got through this COVID thing, and so they're going to have to be blowing the doors off to catch up from what's occurred over the last 8, 10, 12 months. And so your bigger businesses, they have a little more, but they too. I mean, you look at Corvettes, for example. They had to shut down for a while. And I have some friends that wanted to get one of those Corvettes, and they can't get them because they're on back order. And so, again, when that happens, we need to be ready from day one to open the door and go at it like crazy.
Did your time as a student athlete and even as a pro athlete, did your time on the football field help inform the rest of your professional life? What are some of the skills you learned that you've been able to take with you outside that world?
And I was just sharing this with a friend earlier today. one of the most valuable things that I got to experience was the 3 years that I was a cadet in Army ROTC at UK. Invaluable. That helped me with my leadership skills. It helped me learn how to make people follow. It helped me learn how to make people want to be a part of my team. And yes, I like winning. That always helps too. But just those basic skills were invaluable. Now, as a pro, it's all about relationships, because you know that career is going to end, and the average NFL career is 2.76 years. And so I was made aware of that early on, and so I was always looking to what I was going to do next. And these last 4 years were probably the most satisfying and enjoyable years of my professional career. To be able to give back to so many people that have supported me when I was a student athlete here at the university. And so to be able to go into these communities and help bring jobs and help people get trained up for jobs was just so rewarding to me and for me. And all the incredible people that I've met from Eastern Kentucky to Western to Northern to South Central. I mean, I've been throughout the state over the last 4 years. And, of course, when I was deputy secretary as well. Rewarding. Most rewarding experience of my professional career.
And even though you've looked ahead in all of the career paths you've taken, it also helps you appreciate the here and now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I just coming from a little small town, and that's why I can relate to so much of Kentucky, all of Kentucky, actually. Growing up, my original hometown is Hastings, Florida. Population of 650 people. And so I know what small is like. I know what poverty is like. I got to see it. I got to experience. I got to grow up in it. But also what I was made aware of early on is that my parents told us if you weren't afraid to work and work hard, there was nothing you couldn't have. And so that is what I have lived by all my life. I've tried to bust my butt and do whatever I could to you know, be the best I could be and be the best teammate I could be and be the best player I could be. You know, the things that are critical for success. You know, so that's why it's so easy for me to go into Eastern Kentucky or Western Kentucky and adapt. Because the thing about poverty, it doesn't care about color. Not at all. And so with that in mind, you know, with my experience and seeing what these folk are going through, I'm very empathetic, and I was going to do everything I possibly could to help them better themselves.
Hard work is the great equalizer, isn't it?
Two things: hard work and education.
Right.
Education, I've always said, is the ultimate equalizer. And when I was an athletic director, I would tell my student athletes, here at this university is the only chance you'll get to sit beside Bill Gates' kid. You know, because when you're in education and you're a top student, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's the ultimate equalizer.
Well, you have been the ultimate interview, and I sure do appreciate you calling in and talking to us here on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I wish my teammates over there the very best.
My guest has been Derrick Ramsey, former Kentucky Secretary of Education and Workforce Development. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Caucus Connections. Tune in next week for another episode from the House Majority Caucus.